Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. Welcome. Today's webinar is Affirming Care in a Shifting Landscape, Serving LGBTQ plus youth experiencing homelessness. So we'd like to welcome you all and hear from you as well. So please introduce yourself in the chat. We like to see name, pronouns, where are you coming from? How is your day going so far? And we do have a Q&A function. So as you have questions throughout the presentation, please put your questions in that Q&A box, and then we will have time at the end to go over the questions. The slides from today, as well as a recording of this webinar, will be available on our website. And we do ask for you to take just like 2 minutes to complete the survey that's linked here following the webinar so that we can improve for next time. It's only like 2 required questions and like 3 optional questions. So it's super quick and it helps us a lot for our future webinars. So my name is Trinity. I'm the Senior Policy Associate here at the National Network for Youth. And I'm very thrilled today to be joined by Galloway, the Advocacy Manager at the Forney Center in New York City. So huge thank you to Galloway for leading today's webinar and the Forney Center for contributing to the policy brief that we're going to review today. Galloway, I didn't know if you want to take 1 second to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks y'all so much for being here and saying yes to this webinar today. My name is Galloway. My pronouns are they and them, and I'm the advocacy manager for the Forney Center. I'm also a social worker and somebody that's worked in runaway and homeless youth systems with providers for about 10 years now. So really excited to be here with y'all.
Thank you. So on the agenda today, after kind of some brief intros, we'll do an overview of the policy brief that you will all have access to today, and then it will be posted on our website on Monday, so you get kind of a sneak peek. And Galloway will dive into the unique challenges that LGBTQ plus youth experiencing homelessness face. And we'll also talk about some recommendations for federal policy and program improvements based off of their incredible work at the Forney Center. Then, as I mentioned, we'll have time for questions. Again, put those questions in the Q&A box. And then we'll have some organizational updates from both Forney Center and NN4Y. So the National Network for Youth is a national membership organization partnering with young leaders, youth homelessness service providers, educators, and more. And we all work together to transform systems so that no young person in America experiences homelessness. And we do this through federal policy advocacy, youth and young adult partnerships, and community-based solutions. And I'll turn it over to Galloway.
Thank you. And so you've heard me mention Forney Center. Who are we? So we are actually the nation's largest provider for LGBTQ runaway and homeless youth. And so what that kind of looks like for us is we're located in New York City. So we have 17 different sites throughout the city, but we also work beyond that throughout the state and also nationally and internationally. And you'll learn more about that at the end, some more services that we can offer you. But what that looks like for us is we work to protect and empower LGBTQ youth that are experiencing homelessness by providing safe housing for those youth, holistic care through supportive services. And one of the roles that I have is making sure that we have advocacy tied into that for housing and youth rights, not only for the clients we serve, but the staff as well. So that way, every person that comes to us feels like they have a home, and also folks that look and feel like what they're experiencing in their LGBTQ identity. So really excited to share more about that with you, whether you met us before or meeting us for the first time. Really excited to just have you learn a little bit more around how LGBTQ policies can work for you and your programs in your states and in your counties. So that way we can really ensure that some of the most vulnerable folks right now, currently nationally being attacked, can really make sure that they're feeling the care that you all have, that you do every single day. So.
Thank you. So, we're excited to announce and be here today to celebrate the release of our new policy brief all about LGBTQ plus youth experiencing homelessness. And again, you all will get kind of a preview sneak peek of that report. I think Kayla will be sharing a link in the chat. And then the report will be posted on our website on Monday. So, these young people experience homelessness at higher rates compared to their non-LGBTQ plus peers, but despite this, are less likely to access available services and too often encounter programs that are not designed or equipped to meet their specific needs. And this combined with, as Galloway mentioned, the kind of heightened negative rhetoric and actions from our federal government right now really puts these young people in crisis with not a lot of places to turn to. So the policy brief summarizes the latest research on LGBTQ plus youth experiencing homelessness, which I will just plug to any researchers out there. There's not a ton, so could be a great research opportunity. The policy brief also highlights the unique challenges faced by LGBTQ plus youth, which are important to recognize as we think about the policy and programmatic solutions for these young people. And finally, it shares some policy and programmatic solutions for providing accessible, affirming, and effective services. Before turning it over to Galloway to get into all the details, I just want to frame the urgency of this issue and why it's important for us to talk about. So LGBTQ plus youth are 120% more likely to experience homelessness than their non-LGBTQ plus peers. And typically this experience of homelessness happens all or in part because of family rejection or another form of discrimination based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. Of all youth ages 18 to 25 who have experienced homelessness, between 20 to 40%, sometimes more, identify as LGBTQ+, despite them making up a smaller percentage of the overall youth population. So we see some disproportionate rates of homelessness. One thing we emphasize in the report is that this is not a homogenous population, and typically youth who identify as transgender or non-binary experience higher rates of homelessness and higher rates of discrimination than their cisgender peers. And again, I'll call out researchers. Exploring these differences was particularly challenging to find some up-to-date research in. So just putting that out there, that could be very helpful as well. And finally, LGBTQ plus youth of color also face higher rates of homelessness than their white peers. So all of this is to say that we know the issue of youth homelessness as a whole is very urgent and serious, but we want to be sure that we are understanding the nuances and the particular needs of the subpopulations that are more likely to experience homelessness. And as I mentioned earlier, are also less likely to access services. So really understanding why that is and how to remedy that is critical. And with that, Galloway is going to talk about everything else. So I'll turn it to you. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much, Trinity, for setting up that framework for us. And so what we're going to do now together is we're going to start to peel open this onion of the policy brief. And as Trinity mentioned, like what we know, and you all experience this, data and having policy deeply helps a lot of the folks in the systems of power understand our why. But what we're going to do together today is actually understand how that why is experienced for our clients and our staff. Because it's important that we're not just numbers, but the numbers speak to the need. So let's get into it a little bit. So what's really going to help us is to ground in why these numbers happen. So what we know is there's a lot of systematic barriers that come in, and there's a lot of siloing. So we're going to try to like peel that apart to see how all of these different systems are influencing the runaway and homeless youth system. So what we know is LGBTQ youth are at increased risk of experiencing street homelessness and violence. As Trinity already mentioned, a large amount of that is through family rejection, through folks just not accepting people in the LGBTQ identity. And oftentimes that means having to couch surf, having to go sleep on the streets, having to go somewhere where they probably don't feel at their most safe, but it's a form of survival. So Really what these numbers are telling us is that folks that are of the cisgender experience, so when I say cisgendered experience, is those folks that describe a person that has a gender identity that matches the sex they're assigned at birth. So those folks, we found that they're 13% of the cisgender experience are experiencing street homelessness compared to 34% of the LGBTQ population. And just to break it down, because we love an acronym, but I want to make sure folks are in the same language that I'm using. When we say LGBTQ plus, that's lesbian, bisexual, gay, trans, and queer. And then the plus part can be anything from asexual to intersex, and just making sure that all gender identities are really wrapped up into that as well. But it's super important to notice that because you're going to start to see these themes of how cisgendered youth experiencing homelessness have a less percentage of risk. And so what we know is also there's a double rate for sex trafficking as well and sexual exploitation. Oftentimes, a lot of queer and trans identifying folks are having to do sex work, but in that process of doing sex work for survival, folks get exploited. And we see that there's a double rate for those LGBTQ folks compared to non-LGBTQ peers. So it's really important that we start to think about the risk and what's harming and what's affecting these youth. That way we can build programs that really protect them and affirm them. So I wanted to ground us a little bit in that. So next, let's start to think about why is it that they're being overrepresented in the homelessness population right now? And why is it that folks feel not safe to go into these programs? Because of very consistent, unfortunately, discriminatory practices and experiences, a lot of LGBTQ youth, and as somebody that was formerly unhoused and through the foster care experience, and now I have the great fortune of getting to work at the Forney Center, being surrounded by LGBTQ and queer people. I know when I was younger, and I hear it so much of our youth that come in, it can be really scary in general to ask for help. It can be really hard to walk into the doors of a drop-in center. It can be really challenging to just be able to admit, hey, I need something. But we see it even harder for our LGBTQ youth of color just because of the different barriers that folks experience from trying to travel to get somewhere to trying to get the access, meaning internet or just information resources. And then they finally get to these programs and they are not accepted in who they are, meaning folks are often told they dead name them and they do not want to treat them in the way that they want to be treated, meaning through their name or through their pronouns. They're oftentimes just being told that you have to not talk about these things, you have to sleep in this bed with these people. And don't worry, we're going to get more into that. But I say all that to say that there's oftentimes the biggest barrier is for LGBTQs to just come to us. And what that starts with, and we all do this regardless of identities, is it starts with the relationship building. And I think we all, throughout our programs and throughout our experiences working with runaway and homeless youth, we all are trying to create these like safe and welcoming spaces. But I want to invite folks in today to like start to chip away at what that actually looks like. Whether you're an ally or you're a part of the LGBTQ community, or you're just somebody that's curious and wanting to know how you can better these practices that you're doing, it's just making sure that we understand that folks don't feel safe to come to us right now. But these conversations we're going to have today are going to help them get there. So, a little bit more to kind of try to bridge these gaps within these systems. So, LGBTQ youth face higher rates actually of justice involvement. So they experience being incarcerated more. Oftentimes, a lot of LGBTQ people are just they're seen more out in the world as being different or standing out, especially our trans youth. We see this a lot with. Here in New York City, they are more targeted for jumping the turnstile. They are more targeted for being able to dress and walk in the streets the way they want. So that means they're more harassed by everyday civilians. They're more targeted by the police. And that creates this unfortunate reality that this data is showing here is that 13 to 15% of those youth are involved in the juvenile justice system. But the scary thing is they actually only make up 5 to 7% of the population. So that just lets us know that folks, just by their identity alone, are being incarcerated and being punished just for pure existence. And it could be anything related to being, doing survival sex, to substance use, to homelessness. Like all these things are related. But something I want to drop us into that I know so many of us were really affected by. I believe this came out almost 2 years ago. It's scary in the world we live in, how fast things move. But the Grants Pass versus Johnson case. This was a Supreme Court case, and unfortunately, what it was it's trying to eliminate unhoused folks from being seen, meaning they are literally trying to punish people for sleeping on the streets through fines and through making sure that individuals are not being able to be outside and being unhoused. And so we see that a lot actually in New York City through street sweeps, and that is a direct way that they start to target unhoused folks. And unfortunately for the LGBTQ youth, they stand out a little bit more, and we want them to. Their identity is beautiful, it should be celebrated, but it shouldn't be targeted and it should not be punished. And unfortunately, that is the reality of what is happening right now. And I know a lot of folks are seeing this on the federal level. There's over 800 anti-LGBTQ bills that have been introduced this year alone. 800. We're in April 1st, y'all. So as you can imagine, these systems are being created to criminalize LGBTQ people. And I know us as providers, it's our job to protect them and step up to speak to these injustices. So we'll get to how we're going to do that here in a minute. So again, another system involvement here that's going to put a little pressure even further. As I mentioned, a former foster care is LGBTQ youth face higher risk of foster care placements. And it's something we have been working here at the Forney Center through a coalition that we built for the whole state is like, what do these things look like? Because a lot of times it's outdated policies and child welfare systems that unfortunately do not create a welcoming place for the foster care experience for LGBTQ youth, meaning there's not foster homes that are affirming their identities. There's not staff within child welfare that are making sure that the youth are getting their gender affirming care needs met, that they're going and helping them get the proper legal documents they need. And mind you, these youth are coming into these spaces already feeling discriminated and being rejected. So then we're just putting them in another system that's going to keep perpetuating that. So really, the foster care experience does have higher rates of this because of just those placements of the inequities of like the group homes to shelter. And we see that pipeline so much for runaway and homeless youth, just aging out of the foster care and going right into being unhoused. And so it's really important, regardless if we're talking about biological families or chosen families, that these folks are in our care, regardless of which part of the system they enter into, to be affirmed in where they are at. Regardless, our identities will be changing just like the weather. We've now hit spring. We are constantly changing to who we are. And one of my favorite things about working with the population of 16 all the way up to 25 is that we get to see brain development. We get to see development of identities of independence. And so we want to celebrate that regardless of if somebody's coming to us from a juvenile justice experience or foster care, just to ensure that what they're experiencing with getting permanent supportive housing is also being able to affirm their identity in that as well. So we're all here coming from different states. So let's really drop into a couple of these federal policies that, if you're a member of the National Network for Youth, you're probably familiar with them. But let's kind of chip away at how they're a little more connected to the LGBTQ youth identity. So we need to pass, and it feels wild that we haven't passed the Equality Act. So this is exactly what it says in the name. So this is going to allow for LGBTQ individuals, so not just youth, and maybe you that's going to benefit. It might be your neighbor, it might be a family member, but it's going to be able to give folks their basic legal protections and again, ensure that we have comprehensive, inclusive legislation because we need these safeguards right now. As I mentioned, 800 anti-bills We need something to counteract that. And this is going to give people what we know is everyone should have their basic needs met. Everyone should be able to have equal rights. And that is what we're trying to do here. It is wild to say that in 2026, but that is where we're at right now. Another one that I know we've been talking about for a few years with the National Network for Youth is making sure that we pass the Runaway and Homeless Youth and Trafficking Prevention Act. As you've heard me talk about today, sex trafficking is a very harmful and unfortunate reality for some of our youth. So we need to ensure that this is not only funded, but it's being going towards community-based programs that, as you all are already doing this life-saving work, but we got to make sure that these arrangements are in place of protections. So we need to ensure that is passed. And then lastly, we just need to increase access to youth-specific housing programs. And, Ali Forney Center being one of the few LGBTQ youth-specific ones, it's really starting to think about, hey, today we're going to talk a little bit more here in a second about how can you make your programs more affirming, but thinking about where in my state is there a specific youth specific housing program? Where is there a specific LGBTQ housing program? And then once we create those, how are we continuing to grow them? Vouchers is something that we've been talking a lot about here in New York State, and I'm really excited to share with y'all what we're doing. But it's a combination because what we all know as providers or folks that are deeply caring about the runaway and homeless youth population is they come to us temporarily. It's not permanent. And which outlet are they going to go to? Should they go to rapid rehousing? Should we go use a voucher? Maybe we want to get connected to a roommate. But regardless of where the pathways that our clients and our youth choose to go, it's how do we make sure that we're supporting their identity so that way they're not harmed? Because unfortunately, there are a lot of people that want to try to shut down and mitigate. It's unfortunate we just saw yesterday pass in Colorado conversion therapy. People are literally trying to not only eliminate LGBTQ people, but reverse them and make them go back to an identity that they never related to in the first place. So again, these are just three opportunities on the federal level to be able to start to invite in what can we do and how can we speak up. So here in a second, we're going to get to how you can do that more in your programs and also in your state. So I'm excited to share a few things that we're doing at the LA Forney Center. And something I'll share with you later is we're also doing, we do it on the national and international level too. So don't worry, even if this is your first time hearing about this, I know we're recording this and the policy is accessible for all of you, but we also have you and being able to take this off this webinar and being able to do it right in your program as well for free. So don't worry, I got you. But these are just a couple things I wanted to share with you all. Um, and something I saw that I am really glad somebody reminded me of, but just wanted to say thank you, Travis, for this. It's just happy belated Trans Day of Visibility. We were celebrating so much yesterday. We're going to continue celebrating today, and visibility happens every day. So deeply appreciate you reminding me of that, Travis. Thank you. Okay, so let's kind of start to think about. Ooh, we've got a lot of options here, but let's kind of do like, an a la carte and create this menu of what you can start to do for not only maybe you or just one other person you know, or maybe it's for your whole program or maybe your whole state. But one of the things I want to talk about is expanding access to safe, affirming shelter options. So what does that look like? When we say affirming, like, what does that actually look like? And so one of the first things that I encourage folks to do is give yourself the experience. And I know for somebody that's worked 10 years with runaway and homeless youth, sometimes I have to be reminded to be like, whoa, go back to your why. So I invite you all to like go in with fresh eyes into your program. Act like you're walking in those doors for the first time. Do you have an LGBTQ flag anywhere? How is somebody that is of that experience being able to look and be like, okay, I think these people are cool. Is it on your website somewhere? Is it on your social media? I know it can feel really scary right now to feel like we need to shrink, but you would be amazed at how just putting the flag up somewhere really lets people know, okay, that's welcoming. That is a stamp to be like, I'm allowed here. Um, so being able to start with that, being able to think about how are we getting into the spaces and making sure that like Okay, we got the flag up. Now, what do they do when they get inside? Have we created any workshops that are for LGBTQ people? Or when we have our intake, what does that look like on our intake forms to making sure that we have pronouns, making sure that we have preferred names on there, and really reading that, y'all. I know it's easy when we're doing stuff to like work quickly, but just slowing down and really reading that. And then also giving an opportunity to let staff that are of the LGBTQ experience educate folks and let folks know, like, hey, this I think would feel really good for the youth. Um, and I know for us here at the Ally Forney Center, we have like a clothing closet. We have, we have welcoming kits that look like, making sure you have a lot of your basic needs, and we make sure that we have gender affirming care in there. So binders, making sure that folks have makeup, making sure that folks have any and all the things they need to just feel a little bit more close to themselves. So that's one way I invite folks to start to think about when we think about how can I create my space to be affirming? What does it look like? And what does it feel like? Next, let's think about, and I know the word mandating can be scary, especially when we all are working with these state and city agencies that are constantly giving us audits and we have to like meet all these things, but really encourage folks to mandate a culturally competent LGBTQ affirming training for all staff. And now maybe you're like, I don't know how to provide that. Where do we start with that? Something the LA Forney Center does is we go around the nation and actually go around the world to offer up a free service. It's called our global programs, our model replication program. We go around to train the staff to not only be able to like, hey, you want to open up a shelter or do you need a training? We got you on that whole spectrum, but we do it for free and we can come and we can train your staff or we can train maybe a training part of your staff to train other staff, but that is something we offer up. But also, there's other options. You might have an LGBTQ staff member that's really ready to step into that role to educate your staff. So I invite that in from literally executive level all the way down to anyone involved in your programs. It should be mandated for all. And really, what that looks like for us, and it's a huge practice we do here. And I know a lot of us, we didn't come into anything that we do in life, whether it's learning how to drink water, ride a bike, walk, talk. We didn't start coming out doing this. So it's all a muscle that we built. So something we do at the LA Forney Center that I invite folks to try out is when we introduce ourselves to staff, to youth, we just naturally say our pronouns. Like I say Galloway, they, them. And if somebody doesn't say, we say, hey, what are your pronouns? And again, it's practicing that muscle of making it more comfortable because it shouldn't have to be only saying it to an LGBTQ person. You shouldn't only be saying it to certain identities. We should just be saying that all across the board. And if it's something that you're feeling a little stuck in using the they, thems or getting it correct, I just always err on the side of just like using the person's name. That is always a way to like making sure folks feel like, hey, I'm feeling a little bit more like seen and I'm feeling less put in this like box. So again, these are just opportunities to like really lean into cultural competent trainings and making sure they're consistent, y'all. Because a one-off when you first get hired is not enough. Um, and again, with that, let's create identity affirming placement policies because guess what? We're probably all changing. We're probably going, we might go work for a different agency, a different nonprofit. So we need to make sure that these are in place if we leave. And what we've done at the Ally Forney Center is we work with our youth to actually write these policies to ensure that pronouns are being used, that staff get access to gender affirming care, that youth are being able to have, that we celebrate a Pride Month or we celebrate a T-Dove and being able to access all those things. So making sure that you have policies in place for your LGBTQ youth as well as your staff as well. Big thing I've talked about is relationship building, but we need to invest in relationship centered like care models for the staff and the youth. So like I said, we celebrated T-Dub yesterday. How are you? Don't just do it in Pride, y'all. We got plenty of opportunity to celebrate LGBTQ people, but making sure that we are centering those relationships and your staff are being cared for just as much as the youth that we serve. You might be surprised at knowing that people are shrinking themselves, but really what that looks like is making sure that folks are receiving the trainings that they need, that they're receiving the care that they need, that they're being called by the names that they want. I know I keep repeating that, but you'd be surprised. So really just uplifting those. And what that looks like is it is simply just an email sometimes to all your staff being like, we are so excited to celebrate Trans Day of Visibility. We are so excited for Pride this year. Let's make sure that we give staff the day off. Let's make sure that we give staff the opportunity to really engage and celebrate these things and not just say it. Um, Something else I want to mention to offer up to folks is developing a targeted outreach and making low barrier entry points for trans and queer youth. So, we all have unique approaches to outreach depending on the areas we are, rural versus urban areas. Outreach looks a little different. But how do we create these entry points? So, for us with our outreach is when we go out, we bring safer sex kits. So we make sure that like if youth doesn't want to come with us or receive our services, that we are at least being able to provide things that they need. We bring gender affirming care kits out with us when we do our outreach. We again introduce ourselves with our name and our pronouns. On our outreach vans, we have the flag. So just thinking about your outreach and like, hey, this is the first time somebody might be talking to somebody about their housing. Might be a first time somebody's feeling seen and wherever they're at. So like, how are you also making sure that we are affirming that LGBTQ identity as well? Um, and then in that, I want to make sure that like we're offering up, we've talked about offering these up in programs, but really specializing those services for LGBTQ youth of color. So what that looks like is I know for us here, we offer a robust amount of services at the LA Forney Center, from therapy to art therapy to workshops to doing a lot of internships. And so what we try to do here is making sure that their identity is seen and felt. So we will hang up throughout our space like various Black and brown trans leaders. So folks feel like, hey, I have an opportunity to see what that looks like. I don't just have to like make it up in my head or feel alone that I will never be able to grow into that identity. One of our responsibilities, I think, as providers is to be that example of the things that folks want to grow to. And that often it needs to be representative for our youth of color as well. So making sure that there's unique programs for them, meaning workshops for them, making sure that their identity is seen. If you have a library, what books do you have? Are you having books that show people of the LGBTQ experience of color? And making sure that there is a robust way for folks to feel like every part of their identity is met. Not that we do checklists, but we just want to make sure that folks are seen for every aspect of who they are. And then we need to increase access to long-term housing solutions through supportive and voucher advocacy. So I was excited to share this with y'all because as we were talking about those different pathways of rapid rehousing, supportive housing vouchers, is like oftentimes youth come to us in more of immediate needs or more crisis needs, and then we send them out with permanent housing or vouchers, and we don't know how they're doing. We don't know what they're experiencing. But a lot of that is through our advocacy. And it's an unfortunate thing that's happening right now for a lot of us because the federal government cut access to youth under 25 getting vouchers. And so something that we have done here in New York State, and I'm really excited to share with y'all, is we created this thing. It's called the Housing Access Voucher Program. And it took and it eliminated all those barriers. I'm not going to lie, y'all, it took 4 years to pass this. But what that is we created a voucher program that anyone that is undocumented can apply, anyone that is unemployed can apply, anyone that is formerly incarcerated can apply, and now youth can apply. Because unfortunately, in New York State, we were in a weird place the last year where there was no vouchers for youth. Our mayor at the time, not our current mayor, the former mayor, he cut off, we had to sue him, but he cut off vouchers for us to be able to use. So again, a lot of us are unfortunately denied a lot of things as providers, but I want to explore with you all what it would look like to not always be on the defense, but be on the offense of being like, okay, what are the vouchers that we want for our program? And then, yes, it doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen. And going and building those relationships with our champions in the city and state to have those conversations, invite them into your drop-in centers, invite them into your shelters to come and have exchange with our youth to see the spaces that we serve. And then that way they're like, oh, this matters. Oh, we need to get these vouchers. We got to get the budget together so we can make sure all these needs are met. So just want to name that like it's not just about this short term, but it's about the long term as well. Because I know I always joke that I'm like, my dream is to be out of a job. I want everyone housed. And so thinking about that part as well. Just two last things I want to share with y'all, and then I want to open it up for questions. But we really want to center the youth voice and lived experience in program design. And so I really want to lean into this program design. Something we're trying to do here is we're trying to actually shift from being youth focused to being youth led. So what we did was we started a YAB, and I know many of you have YABs, but we started a youth advisory board. And we started to shift that around because it was starting to feel a little performative at one point. It's like, okay, we have youth and they meet and, we listen, but we started to shift that. When I say being youth led, it means that they're in the team with the executive leadership. They are part of being in the interviews when we hire staff. They're actually helping us design um, an ethics code of ethics right now for our staff. They're part of our grievance. So when clients have grievance, they help us figure out the best form of how to hold that staff accountable. So I really want to like invite folks into like, how are your programs designed? First, when was the last time they were updated? And did youth have any involvement in that? And if youth haven't had any involvement in that, I think we need to take a step back and really ask ourselves, how is that serving them? How is that making sure that they actually are being a part of like how these kind of programs play out? And we saw a lot of the data today of how much LGBTQ youth are larger represented in the runaway and homeless youth population. So I really invite you in to like think about when those youth are in your programs, how are they a part of that design as well? And then lastly, and this is honestly some of the hardest part, y'all, is like, how do we lower these silos? How do we ensure cross-system coordination? As we heard today, there's a lot of parallels between the foster care, the juvenile justice, and our housing systems. But how do we ensure that there's this cross-system collaboration? And I fully believe in coalition building. And so we started something here in this, I have one in the city and one in the state. And this is just to give you all a little hope. In the city, we formed one and we have over 70 providers, and we ended up getting $13.725 million for trans and queer folks in New York City last year, y'all. Last year, during the height of like a lot of discrimination. And what we did with that was it was through relationship buildings with our providers, because so much, I know we all work so hard and our time's so limited and we're exhausted and we're probably burned out. But it's like we stopped trying to compete with each other and we started to be like, yo, let's talk, let's get that money. And what we know is we have more in common than we actually realize. And so when something happens where our program's out of something, I know I can call that other program. I know that, like, oh my goodness, I'm really worried about this federal cut. Are you worried too? Okay, let's get together and talk to this elected official and get a little pot of money to protect us. So we did that here in the city. And then the state level, I started a coalition to push back on transphobia and homophobia and child welfare. And so what that looked like, and it was uncomfortable, y'all, but I truly believe with change, there's going to be a little discomfort. And what that looked like was we built this coalition. It has 180 child welfare and runaway and homeless youth providers across the whole New York state. And we actually did something very unique where it was like, okay, we don't want to do advocacy, we want to change policy. So we met with the state agencies that fund all of us and the city agencies that fund us all. And we got a deep accountability. And it looked like, how are we going to make amends? You have outdated policies from 2012. You haven't even included LGBTQ youth in some of these things, like making sure that we are the voice for the voiceless, because unfortunately, our clients don't always have access to a lot of these people. And so we need to be that access for them and speaking up for them. And so that's what I mean by like cross-system collaboration. I wanted to share a little examples of like coalition building or thinking about what does advocacy look like in your county? What does advocacy look like in your cities, in your programs? Because whether we like it or not, these systems influence each other. But when they're siloed, it actually just makes it a lot harder and it puts more work on us as providers. So I know I said a lot, and trust this is just the start of many of things. Like I mentioned, I'm going to give you a couple resources of how after this webinar you can continue to learn and grow and expand self or programs. So thank you just for digesting a little bit that with me.
Thank you so much, Galloway. That was
Yeah.
amazing, and I learned a lot. So now we're gonna have some time, I think about like 10 minutes or so for questions. So please again put your questions in the Q&A function, and I'll just elevate a couple and give you a sec, Galloway, because I know you just talked for a long time. Galloway is going to go over Ali Forney Center's global programs and trainings after this, so stay tuned and they'll talk about that. And then there was a question about the Colorado ruling. It does not mandate conversion therapy. It's just a ruling that struck down the state's attempt to ban conversion therapy practices. So now the case is going to go back to the lower courts for the final verdict. So not mandated, but it just wouldn't allow the state to ban these practices. And I think there's some other similar cases happening across the country. Okay, so there's some questions in the Q&A right now that I'll read for you, Galloway. The first is one that we also had from our registration, and I'm sure it's one that's on a lot of people's mind right now. And I know you're in New York, but I'm sure you have some insight. Suggestions for implementing trainings or potentially flipping the culture, I think like advocacy work and all of that for those folks that are in red states or otherwise in conservative organizations or just working with conservative, lawmakers or whatever that might be.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I'm in New York State, but I'm actually from the South, so I can really relate to this as a queer person from Georgia. Um, I know I've really emphasized this thing on relationship building, but it really is that, y'all. People are surprised by this, and if you live in New York, you know this. New York City is blue. The rest of the state, red, 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 red. Super conservative in New York State. And I challenge myself all the time, and I challenge others. When you're meeting with a conservative lawmaker, the best thing for folks to do is to talk to you one-on-one. Yelling at people or trying to like attack people. I don't know about y'all, but I actually I shut down. My body just goes whoop, nope, I don't want to hear what you have to say. So it really is, I remind folks all the time that those folks in positions of power, they actually work for us. We elected them, whether we chose them or not. So that means those buildings are for you to enter into, for our youth to come with you. And so I invite folks in, setting up a meeting and getting to know them. Start to build a relationship, just like you would with anyone. What music are you into? What foods do you like in the neighborhood? And then that lets them start to get to know you as a person. I've literally met with some really extreme Republicans, and I've been able to like maybe I can't change the way that they did a policy, but I can change the way that they felt or the way that they looked at a trans and queer person because they have to look at our youth in the eyes and they have to look at me in the eyes and be like, wow, you're not awful. Wow, you're not somebody that's like trying to attack me or shut down my beliefs. Because oftentimes folks are just scared. It really is just folks feeling like their own identity is being attacked and their rights are being taken away. And all we're trying to say is that we're all equally deserve the same rights. No one deserves to be pushed out or pushed down for who they are, regardless if we're talking about being LGBTQ, if we're talking about being a migrant, if we're talking about being Black. It literally is just for folks to be able to just see your humanity. And we all have that. And so I truly believe it starts with the one-on-one conversations. And also, if you're like, hey, I'm struggling getting that meeting, talking to folks in that district that have a program or maybe a friend that lives there and going in through that route of like, hey, I live here. Let's talk about that. because they actually deeply care from hearing about people that vote for them. So hopefully I answered that for you. So a lot of unique ways, but yeah, it can be really scary. But starting with that conversation with those conservative people, and then when it comes to like, what do I do just in those states? Is again, it feels like a small act of defiance, but literally just you putting that flag up, putting up, saying your name, saying your pronouns, like again, those are just little ways to push back. Now, when I say push back, I know for us, and we've been doing this work for 25 years, we still have to be mindful of like, yo, I don't want the federal government flagging me. I know a lot of folks have had to change maybe a little bit of what their websites are saying or what they're saying online. And it's this awkward dance of like, how do I push back but protect myself? Like none of us want our programs to shut down. And so when we write our grants, when we put those things on social media or on our website, it's like being unique with our language, but knowing when we get in these live conversations with our youth or with a conservative Republican, that's the opportunity we get to show more of what we can't always say in those more regulated spaces. So yeah, just invite folks to start to build those relationships. It's not going to be easy. But truly, when they hear and see folks, they actually are able to like soften a little bit as opposed to just like an email or a yelling at.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, a couple questions I'll mash together since it's about youth leadership. Part A is how do you get young people to become involved in the initiatives? And then the other is sometimes there's uneasiness in programs with youth being the boss, being involved in high level conversations about budgeting, fundraising, design. There's a sense that full-time staff need to move forward with their job responsibilities independent of the pace at which the youth are organizing. Any advice on how to navigate that and really continue to authentically center youth leadership?
Yeah. So to the first question, really great question. How do we get our youth involved? So kind of a twofold, and really, let's be honest, it's about the money. So I always say, pay youth, they deserve it. So, like, first, how we get our youth involved, whether we're doing a rally or we're trying to testify, or we might be going up to the Capitol to talk to our electeds, because it's not close for us. We have to travel almost 4 hours, is we pay them. And we try to create opportunities for folks to feel like, okay, my time is valued. Now, so like you don't have the money, then what do you do? So what we did here was we created this thing called Midtown Council. We hold it once a week, and it's literally just for the youth to get together and they vent, and staff just sits there and like just hears what they have to kind of say in their grievances. And so we use that opportunity to then kind of see a lot of, I'm sure all of us can see a lot of the leaders in our program. So that really identified the leaders for us. And a lot of them have gone on to join our YAB. So I encourage you, if you got a YAB, use your YAB. But that allowed us to really be able to see leaders in the space that were really passionate about it. And I think the biggest way to get youth involved is through youth. So a lot of our youth will connect with each other and they will share out the things that scare them, the things that they're worried about, and then they will start to work together to be like, "Hey, there's these great opportunities. There's these things that we can talk about." Because there's always going to be an option, whether we're going to a protest or we're just talking about it amongst ourselves. Like there's always a way to be able to get involved, but it's like as the question is asking is how do we get them involved? So if we don't have opportunities to pay them, I encourage you to really support and help your leaders grow to be able to support others. Um, because this generation now is in no short supply of passion. So much of the times I share something with the youth and they're just so fired up and ready to go. They're like, we want to come with you. We want to be involved in that. When you take them to those meetings with the electeds, they feel so in touch with like feeling like they have a little bit of power with what is happening to them that they're always going to want to show up. But if we don't actually give them the opportunity to try that out, and it doesn't have to be a big thing, you can meet with electeds all the time on Zoom. Let those youth come to that. Let them experience that. They'll get involved. Trust, I have to all the time. Like there are times when I would haven't been able to pay youth to come with us to stuff, and I really want to, and it's but they are like, no, I'm cool not getting paid. I care. But it's helping them understand why what these government people are doing affects them, helping them understand that. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to do another mashup here that's kind of about the different programmatic updates and recommendations that you went over. So the first sort of part is, if I'm at an agency where we're doing none of these things, where's a good place to start? Like, where would be your priority to start so that we can begin to make that impact? And then, kind of related to the updates, where do you typically see the most resistance or pushback from staff when you do trainings about these care options from orgs?
Yeah. And I realized I didn't answer the second half to the other one, which kind of ties into this as well, which is like, what do we do when staff doesn't really want to have youth super involved? And what do we do in this? And listen, I don't know what your position is. You could be the top person making the decisions, or maybe you're not. But I invite folks to really lean into why. Why is that not happening? Why are folks feeling gatekeeping? Why do we feel like we need to police our youth being in those spaces? Because if you're somebody that doesn't want to be transparent about what your budget is, if you don't want to be transparent about the decision making, at the end of the day, the youth will always find out. Those decisions will affect them, and it's called the internet. They can find out a lot of stuff. You'd be surprised. I always say, if we want to build healthy relationships, be transparent and just say, hey, we want y'all in those spaces, but unfortunately at this time, like our board won't allow it. Our board, we're working through it, and just be honest with them. What folks don't appreciate, and I think we can all attest to this, is like folks don't appreciate when you lie to them or just ignore them. And it's like just acknowledging, like, hey, we really want you to be involved in these things. Unfortunately, right now, we're having some discomfort. Folks are feeling a little like we're uncertain if we can have folks in that spaces. But again, don't jump in the deep end. Try it out a little bit. Try it out where it's like, let's just see what it's like for a youth to sit in on an interview of a hiring process. Let's try it out where a youth just sits in on us meeting with our leadership team to make a decision around what color we're going to paint the space. Just let them have a little bit of involvement in decision making. I get the need to be like, hey, we can't share everything, but ask yourselves, what is one thing that we can share to give folks an opportunity to make a decision, even if it is just what workshops we offer. There is an opportunity for every one of us right now to have a youth be involved in that decision. It doesn't have to be as big. Start small. And Trinity, can you remember the other two questions you just asked me now?
Yeah, I think when you kind of answered like where would you start in
Mhm.
programmatic updates if your org doesn't have any of these? And where do you typically see like the most challenges or pushback from staff when you're sort of implementing those things?
Yeah, I think one of the first ones I love starting with like a workshop or what folks want to see. And then one of the things I love to do is I create a workshop with the youth. So it's not just staff running it. I'm like, let's create one together. So having that allows them a little bit an opportunity to feel like they're leading and decision making. And then what happens when folks push back or folks aren't wanting to. I think it's like having an opportunity, and I was just having a conversation about this with our executive director of like, I was like, hey, how do we go from being like youth focused to being youth led? And it's gonna take discomfort, especially in an organization like we've been around 25 years. Change doesn't happen overnight, and sometimes it is like, I don't want to do that. Nope, nope. And what it takes is getting multiple staff on board, whether it's through a petition or doing a call-in meeting, but there are going to be times where we have to call in those in higher positions of power to come in to try to understand these things. And I remind that the people have the power, staff have the power to be able to hold them accountable. And so it is uniquely having to sometimes have these conversations over and over and be like, help me understand why we cannot. I want to understand why we cannot. And if you're an executive director, it's pushback from the board, but it's asking ourselves what are little ways that we can get us there? Because every little opportunity gets you there. It's not going to happen overnight. It didn't happen for us overnight. This has been like a 6 year process. And we just started allowing our youth in that room to be with the team making the decisions. So it starts small and then it gets bigger and bigger and it ripples.
All right, just one more quick one. And I know you have your email in the next slide too. So if folks have other questions, then we have that info there. But I want to give you a chance to talk about global programs. But last quick one, what do you put in your gender affirming care kits?
Yeah, thank you for that. So in our gender affirming care kits, I mean, sometimes we'll create like we'll do like an a la carte where youth will come and pick because they're all in there. But it's thinking about binders or anything for like chest, so bras, binders, makeup. We really some folks love makeup. Maybe folks have just started tea, and so they need shaving kits, nail polishes. Again, we have ours where it's literally set up where it's all there, and then we give them a bag and they just kind of pick and choose. Because I remind folks, gender like affirming care is also just could be like some really cute socks that you love that you're like, ooh, I didn't feel like that was allowed for me because it was in the boys section. And it's stuff like that. But it's really on that level is like just getting folks to like more of the outward identity. And then we have a medical team that also helps more with like more of the medical side of gender affirming care. And so that really looks like, and that's deeper education. And we have a whole clinic for that when it comes to testosterone and different levels like that. But yeah, I like the youth to get to pick and choose. And then again, an opportunity to have youth get involved and be like, hey, what do y'all want to see in gender affirming care kits? Because it might be different for youth in Ohio versus youth in New York City and youth in Alaska, all over. And so yeah, we change our kits often, actually. But one of the things I love is getting to pick and choose. I do see something I just want to mention briefly. I've seen it a little bit in the chat of like forgetting the pronouns. Listen, y'all, we are not perfect. As a non-binary person, I get pronouns wrong all the time, all the time, all the time. It is not about being perfect. It is about doing the practice of like either moving forward and being like, hey, sorry, got that wrong, and just keeping it moving, not making a big deal. Doesn't need to be like screamed out, but it's just like trying to be like, mess that up. Let me get it right the next time. Or pulling them aside and be like, hey, want to check in. How did that feel? I recognize I kind of got it wrong, but we're gonna all mess up. I do it all the time. But again, it's just asking people their preferred pronouns. That's where it starts. Sharing yours. You'd be surprised at like how affirming it is for youth when we share ours. And then just being like, my bad. It's really not, as somebody that has is misgendered often, I find it more helpful when somebody just acknowledges and moves on than either making it like a more bigger deal than it needs to be or just constantly doing it. But I think all of you asking that question, it shows how much you care. So just want to say that. But let's continue this conversation. I can help support you with your state advocacy if you want to help building coalitions. This is my email. And then, as I mentioned, I put in our director of advocacy and global programs, Nadia Swanson. We who runs the global programs. Like I said, nationally and internationally, we go around. We can train y'all for free. We can come help you figure out how to open up a drop-in center, start a shelter. Really any and all things evolving, making, affirming LGBTQ shelters, we got you. And again, it's for free. So feel free to grab both of those emails and let us support you.
Thank you so, so much to Galloway and to everyone for being here today. We really appreciate it. I think I'm just gonna go ahead to the end slide. Like I said, the slides and the recording of this webinar will be posted on our website. And then on Monday, the full report will also be posted. But please feel free to reach out. Our information is here if you have any further questions or need anything. Huge, huge thank you again to Ollie Forney Center and our other contributors to this report. And thank you to everyone for being here today. Hope you have a good rest of your day, good weekend.